Let's talk about installing dhcp and some basic configuration options with dhcp. First of all, to install dhcp, you must go to Add Remove Programs, or in 2003 now, you can go to Manage Your Server Roles. Once you install dhcp, you've got a hoop to jump through before you can give out IP addresses, and that is that you must authorize the dhcp server. This is designed to prevent rogue dhcp. So when a 2000 or 2003 dhcp server boots up, what it does is it checks with Active Directory to see if it's on the authorized list. If it's been authorized, then it will be able to give out IP addresses. If not, it won't. So to authorize a dhcp server, you must be an enterprise admin. And that's getting into Active Directory territory, but basically an enterprise admin is a forest-level admin, pretty high up on the food chain. But once you've authorized your server, the server checks with Active Directory, sees that it's authorized, it will give out IP addresses. Next step then is to define a pool of addresses you want to give out using dhcp. That pool of addresses is called a scope. Let's take a look at an example scope. We could create a scope ranging from 192.168.2.1 up through 192.168.2.100. When you define a scope, you need a subnet mask. So in this case, I'm going to use a default Class C subnet mask of /24. What that means is that this dhcp server will be able to give out addresses for hosts between 1 and 100. So we basically have 100 addresses to give out. One problem with the subnet mask is that once you set it in a scope, it's fixed. That is, if you check out the scope properties, you'll see that the subnet mask is grayed out. It cannot be changed. So if later on you decide you want a different subnet mask, you're going to have to delete your original scope and recreate it from scratch. Also, when you define a scope, you specify a lease duration. The default lease duration is 8 days. Well, in some cases that may be fine. In other cases you might want to adjust the lease duration. For example, let's say we've got computers that never move around. They're in the same location of the office at all times. They have the same IP address at all times. What you can do then is increase the lease duration to maybe 30 days, and that's going to cut down on network traffic with the clients trying to renew with the dhcp server. On the other hand, let's say we've got laptops that roam around frequently and they're constantly hooking into different subnets. In that case, you would want a short lease duration so that they give up their addresses very, very often. Next thing to talk about are exclusions. There's two ways to exclude addresses that you do not want your dhcp server to give out. For example, addresses that are already assigned to servers. The two ways are to implicitly or explicitly exclude the addresses. First of all, let's say that your servers range from .101 to .120. Well, our original scope here only defines 1 to 100. Now, if our servers range from 101 up to 120, then we're okay. In a sense, these addresses have been excluded from the original scope of 1 to 100. We could call that an implicit exclusion. However, what's recommended is that you actually explicitly exclude those addresses. For example, in your original scope, you would actually define the original scope to be 1 to 120, which you'll notice includes some of those server addresses, the 101 to 120. Now that's bad. We don't want dhcp to give out those addresses. So what we do is explicitly define an exclusion range to prevent those addresses from being given out. And so in the dhcp console, you can specify an exclusion range. In this example, the exclusion range would be 192.168.2.101 to 2.120. Now you might think you're done. You've set up your scope with your pool of addresses. You've set up the subnet mask. You've set up a lease duration. You've defined any possible exclusions. You've authorized your server, and yet your server is still not giving out IP addresses. And the reason for that is that there's a second hoop to jump through for you to give out IP addresses, and that is to activate the scope. You must authorize the dhcp server itself and then activate any scopes you define on the server. Once you jump through those two hoops, you can give out IP addresses to your clients.